But he said the party had become enamored of identitarianism, a word he uses because he won't say woke, radiating the repellent idea that identity is more important than humanity. We could never wash off the stench of it, he said, calling defund the police the three stupidest words in the English language.
Something strange is happening in the Democrat Party. They are pretending to be more reflective. They're pretending to say, oh, we have the answers, and yes, the left has gone too far. However, we all know the truth. We have watched them over the last several months and years defend every single aspect about the Biden-Harris administration that was defeated resoundingly by the American people. And now that's all blown up in their faces, they're pretending like, oh, we knew this all along, and you should have listened to us from the very beginning. Let's go ahead and jump into these clips, but before we continue, please like and comment on this video so we can break through the algorithms. Here we go.
It's an interesting message for Democrats. Maureen Dowd's piece for the New York Times entitled Democrats and the Case of Mistaken Identity Politics. It really crystallized how some Democrats are finally waking up and realizing that woke is broke. And Maureen writes this: Donald Trump won a majority of white women and remarkable numbers of Black and Latino voters and young men. Democratic insiders thought people would vote for Kamala Harris even if they didn't like her, to get rid of Trump. But more people ended up voting for Trump, even though many didn't like him, because they liked the Democratic Party less. I've often talked about how my dad stayed up all night on the night Harry Truman was elected because he was so excited. And my brother stayed up all night the first time Trump was elected because he was so excited. And I felt that Democrats would never recover that kind of excitement until they could figure out why they had turned off so many working class voters over the decades and why they had developed such disdain toward their once loyal base. The party embraced a worldview of hyper-political correctness, condescension, and cancellation. And it supported diversity statements for job applicants and faculty lounge terminology like Latinx and Black, Indigenous people of color. This alienated half of the country or more. And the chaos and anti-Semitism at many college campuses certainly didn't help. When the woke police came at you, Rahm Emanuel told me, you don't even get your Miranda rights read to you. There were a lot of Democrats barking, people who don't represent anybody, he said, and the leadership of the party was intimidated. Democrats learned the hard way in this election that mothers care, and this is a key line in this piece, that mothers care both about abortion rights and having their daughters compete fairly and safely on the playing field. Keep that in mind.
And keep this in mind. A revealing chart that ran in the Financial Times showed that white progressives, and this is how it has been for too long, white progressives hold views far to the left of the minorities they champion. White progressives think at higher rates than Hispanic and Black Americans that, quote, racism is built into our society. And get this, many more Black and Hispanic Americans surveyed compared with white progressives responded that, quote, America is the greatest country in the world.
Gobsmacked Democrats have reacted to the wipeout in different ways.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I think we could talk about this for 4 hours. I mean, I'm just looking at this, and it's stuff that we've all talked on the show about.
So notice the fake shock that Joe Scarborough has there. Most white progressives believe in institutional racism. I can't believe it. And guess what? American citizens, whether they're Black or Hispanic or white, heritage, whatever the case may be, they actually think America is the greatest country in the world, unless you happen to be left-leaning. And I love that little bit at the end. This is something we've been talking about. No, you haven't. You have been an advocate for this leftist garbage. You have been a true believer. You've been the one spreading all of this, right? How many times have you sat there and talked about the institutional racism that is present in this country? How many times have you sat there and talked about the trans rights, etc.? How many times have you sat there and talked about how Donald Trump and his supporters and beliefs are the worst thing in the world, the most dangerous thing that could possibly happen to this country? And yet here you are, totally shocked and amazed, finally, after you lose an election, after you're getting the data, and now you're trying to gaslight everyone into thinking that you thought this way all along. It's complete garbage.
Bernie Sanders has not won. Let me, with all due respect, and I have a great deal of respect for him, for what he stands for, but I don't respect him saying that the Democratic Party has abandoned the working class families.
Senator, how do you respond to Nancy Pelosi?
Well, Nancy's a friend of mine, and we've worked together on many issues. But here is the reality. I have to say to Nancy, in the Senate in the last 2 years, we have not even brought forth legislation to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, despite the fact that some 20 million people in this country are working for less than $15 an hour. In America today, we have not brought, in the Senate, we have not brought to the floor the PRO Act to make it easier for workers to join unions. We're not talking about defined benefit pension plans so that our elderly can retire with security. We're not talking about lifting the cap on Social Security so that we can extend the solvency of Social Security and raise benefits. Bottom line, if you're an average working person out there, do you really think that the Democratic Party is going to the mats, taking on powerful special interests and fighting for you? I think the overwhelming answer is no, and that is what has got to change.
My interview with Senator Sanders was that, to me, is such a prime example of where Democrats have kind of lost those people. Now, the point I was making with him is that there are a lot of things that Joe Rogan says and believes that a lot of Democrats just totally shun. He's said not great things about some social issues that Democrats don't agree with. He doesn't support vaccines. And so that is part of the reason why when Bernie Sanders went on the show, he got vilified. But him getting vilified by a lot of people on the left is case in point of the intolerance among a lot of people in the Democratic Party who claim that their whole mission is to be tolerant.
Well, and isn't that kind of a central piece of the conversation Democrats are having now about why this happened?
It is. And that's precisely why. Now, Bernie. Senator Sanders.
I covered the man. I was on the road with him for a really long time. Everybody calls him Bernie, but I agree with you. We're sitting in Washington, so it should be Senator.
His whole thing is our policies are not geared toward the working people. We went back and forth on that because President Biden's policies were geared toward the working people in a lot of ways. But it's also about the culture, the messaging, the approach. And that is, I think, the sort of Joe Rogan example is a key one.
Well,
Now, say what you will about Bernie Sanders, and I don't particularly care for him at all, being a democratic socialist that he is, but he used to actually care about the working class in America, okay? But then for whatever reason, he did a complete 180. He was actually pro-closed border, anti-illegal immigration into this country because it drove down wages for your average everyday working Americans, and that was his whole thing, right? But then all of a sudden, the Democrat Party gets their claws into him, and he's running for president. He has to say, totally open border, let them all in, right? We have to, of course, do that because, of course, the new mascot for the Democrat Party is, in fact, the illegal immigrant. They no longer care about the working class, and that is something that Bernie Sanders actually says accurately. If you think the Democrat Party is going to stand up for you against big corporations, big pharma, big anything, then you are wrong, right? They are the party that has been bought and paid for by all of those large conglomerate corporations who are willing to work lockstep to bring the government into your life via all of these big corporations, okay? They want to destroy your freedoms and solidify your vote as some type of worker bee underling, okay? And another side note about Joe Rogan, all right? What the Democrats and the leftists have to understand is basically he was pretty much on your side. But when he came out and said, hey, this whole vaccine scenario for COVID doesn't make any sense, you went after him. You tried to destroy him. You put him on TV with a green filter to make him look sick and ill, okay? And as a matter of fact, the only thing he really broke with you on was that boys competing against girls in sports was not fair and possibly dangerous. But of course, since he was not lockstep with the left, they had to, of course, ostracize him, kick him out of the party, right? He was happy to not have Trump on his podcast at all. He was actually coming forward and saying, hey, I don't want to help that guy be president. But then what happened? The left overplayed their hand. They went so radical that he eventually had to come back to reason, and you forced him to it, which was beautiful to watch.
Look, I happen to believe that Donald Trump is a major threat to our democracy. I believe that as much today as I did this time last week. Fascism is a threat, a dire one. So is authoritarian leadership. I believe that in my bones, and I believe it's what we're facing. But clearly that message didn't connect with enough people. And maybe it was the wrong closing message to choose with the wrong people. Too many people either didn't buy it and didn't show up, or were willing to price in the risk because other issues were more important to them. And the answer to that failure isn't to say fascism doesn't matter, it does, or to say everyone who didn't vote for Harris is to blame for not hearing or understanding the threat. It's for candidates to rethink how they prioritize what they talk about moving forward. It's to rethink how they engage moving forward. Do that Joe Rogan podcast, by the way. Part of the answer is to stop diagnosing and to start listening.
I do have concerns about the way the Democratic Party relates to working class voters in this country. The only group that Democrats gained with in the election on Tuesday was white college graduates, and among working class voters, there was a significant decline. The only group they Democrats won among were people who make more than $100,000 a year. You can't win national elections that way, and it certainly shouldn't be that way for a party that fashions itself as the party of working people. So I think he has a point. Mike knows this because we've been talking about it. You can't approach working people like missionaries and say, we're here to help you become more like us. There's an unwritten, kind of unspoken disdain, unintended disdain in that. I think Biden has done, programmatically some good things for working people, but the party itself has increasingly become a Smarty-Pants, suburban, college-educated party, and it lends itself to the kind of backlash that we've seen.
So Jen Psaki isn't willing to back off that whole fascist attack line against Donald Trump, even though he just won the election democratically with the vast majority of the people. Oh, I wonder why our messaging didn't work. It's because you're saying things that aren't true, honey. Okay, so that's the first thing, okay? But David Axelrod, he recognizes that, yes, we're not connecting with the middle class, the working class in this country, because we've become the Smarty-Pants leftist elite party who is honestly talking down to Americans. You shouldn't use gendered language. Boys can be girls. COVID vaccines are effective, right? All of this stuff is what the left has been preaching and trying to shove down your average everyday American's throats. But of course, we see the reality because we live in it every day. Not one of these leftist elitist bubbles that is so popular with the upper echelon of our country, with the ruling class of our country. And I'm glad we finally came out and told them all to stop it. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and stay safe out there, people, because they're coming after you.